Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and today I get the opportunity to talk to you guys about one of my personal favorite decks that I play quite often, that I absolutely love, and that is my Ezuri Claw of Progress deck. So let me start. Ezuri Claw of Progress is 2 in Simic for just an amazing piece of Phyrexian perfection. Basically, it says whenever you have a creature with 2 power or less enter the battlefield under your control, you get an experience counter. Then at the beginning of each of your combat steps, you get to put X +1/+1 counters onto a creature you control other than Ezuri, where X is the number of experience counters you have. Now this is just super cool. This is an awesome effect, and the most important part of this for me is it's ETB, not on cast, meaning tokens are going to do this. So you can just have mass token producers, get a whole bunch of experience counters, and get out of control. There's a lot of different ways to build Ezuri. You can go Infect, surprisingly enough I didn't. You could go just all in on tokens. You can kind of do like a Simic +1/+1 counter build. What I decided to do was go with a morph build where a good chunk of the creatures have morph abilities and then work in tokens with that. The reason why morph creatures are awesome in this deck is because no matter what the power and toughness of the morph creature are, when you play it face down, that morph is a 2/2. So if anybody's not familiar with the mechanic morph, you can play a morph creature face down for 3 colorless mana. And then, at any point in time, it's a special ability, I think is what it's called, so it doesn't use the stack. It's weird, you can do it at instant speed, but you can flip that morph creature up for its morph cost, and then you get some really, really cool effects with that flip. So this is perfect. We get a whole bunch of experience counters from playing these morph creatures, which are all 2/2s, and all these instant speed interactions that you might normally lack in a creature-based deck. So that's awesome. So again, this is a very creature-based deck, so I'm going to start by going over some of my favorite creatures in the deck with a little bit of emphasis on the morph creatures. So the first creature I want to talk about is called Broodhatch Nantuko. This card is super fun. So basically what it reads is whenever it's dealt damage, you get that many 1/1 insects. Now it's only a 1/1 itself, so unless it's pumped up, it itself is going to die. So you have options with this card, which I love. One way to play it is to just play it face down as a morph right away, and then just leave it there, and then wait for someone to swing with a big creature, flip it, block with it, and then just get a whole bunch of tokens and a whole bunch of experience counters at once, which is awesome. But another way to use it, and this flexibility is so cool, is to put your +1 counters onto the Broodhatch Nantuko. So all of a sudden, if this thing's a 5/5 or a 6/6, you just hold it up and use it as a blocker. Every time someone attacks you, if you're blocking with it, you're just getting more insects and more experience counters. You can throw more +1 counters on it, and it can get out of hand so fast. And the deck is all about flexibility with these morph creatures, and Broodhatch Nantuko is such a perfect example of that. So yeah, the next creature I'm going to talk about is Mistfire Weaver. Ezuri is going to be a huge target for removal, especially early game. People don't want you piling those counters on early because Ezuri can get out of hand, and that game can end real quick if you just start getting counters everywhere. Yeah, it just gets crazy. So people will try to remove him. But with Mistfire Weaver, you can just morph it up, give Ezuri hexproof, protect him, and keep him around a little bit longer because, even at one point if he gets removed, if you have a big enough board with enough of an engine going, it might not matter too much. Felonite Hermit's another just card I love in this deck because, one, you're going to get the experience counter for playing it face down, but when it's flipped face up, you get 4 1/1s, meaning 4 more experience counters. Oh my god, this is insane. This is one of those things where you can basically play it, even if you only have a few experience counters. If you have a Ezuri out, you wait till the end step before your turn, all of a sudden flip it, 4 more experience counters, and that's when stuff can start getting crazy because all of a sudden you might only have 2 or 3 experience counters. You put that to all of a sudden 6 or 7, and you could just have a giant creature about to swing at someone that they weren't prepared for. And that's why I love these morph creatures, is this explosiveness that you can all of a sudden start doing on people's end steps and setting stuff up right before you take your turn. You want to be able to get in before people can prepare and try to stop you. And the last morph creature I'm going to mention is probably the most famous. I always hear the joke that every morph creature is this, and that's Willbender. I love Willbender so much. There's so many fun interactions with this. And this is a card where you play it face down as a morph, but when you morph it and flip it, you can change the target of any spell or ability that has a single target. The fact that it's spell or ability, this is so good. If anyone tries to do anything to your Ezuri, or if they target you, a number of things, nothing is more fun than flipping up a Willbender and just putting it wherever you want to put it. This is a really, really fun card, and it's one of the things that makes Morph so powerful. Is a lot of the time, that is the joke. Every Morph's a Willbender. People will be very nervous. You could just have one of your token producing Morphs face down, but they might be hesitant to try to use that targeted removal on Ezuri because they might think, oh, he might Willbender and take out my creature. So because it can give people that kind of just cause to hesitate, that little bit of hesitation, they maybe not use that removal on you right away. It's like they always say the best counter spells that when you don't have to play, you can just hold it up as a threat. Morphs can have that same effect a lot of the time. And there's not just morph creatures in this deck. There's a whole lot more, and some of these are crazy with Ezuri. And the first one I'm going to talk about is just a powerful card in general. It's Avenger of Zendikar. This card comes in, and you get the plants based on the number of lands you control. This is one that, if you can get this out with Ezuri out, if you can keep Ezuri on the field for a turn, you might be able to just kill someone, or get to the point where you're just in a position to just take over. Because right there, if you play Avenger there's not a lot of artifact-based ramp in this deck, so the odds are you'll have 7 lands if you're going to cast this 7-mana card. That's 7 experience counters. You can add 0 and all of a sudden you're just throwing 7+1 counters onto a creature. This can get so out of hand, and in combination with some other cards that we're going to get to later, you can get into some board states that just are silly. Speaking of silly, Cold Eye Selkie is the next one, and Cold Eye Selkie is so good. This is a 1/1 with Island Walk that when it deals combat damage, you draw cards equal to the amount of damage dealt, or you may equal to the amount of damage it dealt. Now, it's a 1/1, but if you just throw 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7+1 counters on it, swing at somebody with an island, all of a sudden you're just drawing all these cards. And something interesting about it that I found out the hard way is it's an all or nothing effect. I actually had a crazy game one time where I had, I think, like 63 experience counters, swung at someone with a Cold Eye Selkie, and I would have decked myself if I had the draw effect, so I actually got to draw no cards. So, worth noting that if you do completely go off with this deck, don't let Cold Eye Selkie get too big, or else you won't get to draw any cards. So those last couple were just kind of cool, fun interactions, and then this last category of creatures I'm going to get into are creatures that want +1 counters on them. Essentially, those morph creatures will allow you to get a lot of experience counters and protect your commander. Avenger and Cold Eye Selkie will allow you to, again, get experience counters, draw into the cards you need to, build that engine up. These are the cards that you want to throw all these counters on to get maximum benefit. There's a few cards that fit in the same category, so I'm going to group them together, and these are just insane ramp cards, and that's Crystalline Crawler. You have Gyre Sage. You have Marwyn the Nurture. And you also have Devoted Druid. There's not much to say about these. These just let you ramp insane amounts. This essentially just means you get these out, you're basically just going to play all the cards in your hand whenever you want, because mana is not going to be an issue. And then the last couple cards that really want +1 counters on them I'm going to talk about. One is Mycoloth. And this card is, talk about silly. This is one of those just essentially just exponential effects you're going to have. Because you can just throw +1 counters onto this. Or, just use this Devour effect, get some +1 counters by itself. Oh, look it, I'm getting some Sapperlings. All of a sudden, that gets experience counters, so you can put more +1 counters. And if it makes it another round of the table, all of a sudden you're getting even more Sapperlings, which give you even more experience counters, and so on and so forth. This is probably one of the cards that's not going to survive very long, but if it could survive even a couple rounds of the table, that might be enough to win. And then the last creature I'm going to talk about, and the last one that just loves +1 counters, is Toothy. Toothy is so good. This just basically says, throw a bunch of +1 counters onto it. And the best thing about it is you could just get +1 counters from drawing cards, but we want to have it more explosive. We're just going to take all our experience counters and, convert those into a bunch of +1 counters, throw them all onto Toothy. And the best part is it leaves the battlefield, so if someone can exile it or anything like that, you still draw all those cards. This and Cold Eye Selkie that I mentioned before, you can end up drawing most of your deck real easy and real fast. So moving on to the artifacts, the only one I really need to talk about is Panharmonicon. Oh my gosh, that I mentioned earlier, I had gotten a game where I was like 60-something experience counters in, and I would have decked myself with a Cold Eye Selkie. Panharmonicon is what caused that. Panharmonicon is just the silliest card possible in this deck. So just hear me out. Certain cards basically just break it. Avenger of Zendikar is the best example, and here's how the interaction works. Play your Avenger of Zendikar. So Panharmonicon is going to double the ETB. So let's say you get 7 plants. Well, nope. Instead, you're going to get 14. And not only that, each of those plants coming in is not going to give you 1 experience counter, it's going to give you 2. So playing an Avenger Zendikar with a Panharmonicon out, instead of giving you 7 experience counters, it's going to give you 28. It's just ridiculous, doubling the tokens, then doubling the ETB effects for the experience counters. This card is just ridiculous. There's a lot of ETB effects, but that part doesn't even matter because entering the battlefield is what's causing your experience counters. So this is essentially just doubling your experience counters. And again, with certain interactions, 28 experience counters for 7 mana, it felt so good. It really felt so good. And that's really what this deck is about, is finding these little weird interactions that create just these insanely explosive turns. And I find myself, the more I play it, finding these combinations of cards where, did I just get 30 experience counters? And it's just so much fun. It's the explosiveness of it all. It's crazy. Looking at the enchantments, a couple of just not surprising includes are going to be Doubling Season, because double the +1 counters, and Greater Good. Any deck that you have big power creatures to be able to sack it. Sack engines are great in general, but to be able to draw those cards, awesome. But the two I'm most excited to talk about, one is Adonis Climb. This card is crazy in this deck because you're always going to have a creature with 3 or more +1 counters, so transforming it is no problem. And being able to give one of these big creatures evasion and doubling its power is so useful, because one of the problems the deck might have is you're going to have huge creatures, but not a lot of them have trample, not a lot of them fly. You have a few unblockables. So essentially, you're going to have all these big dudes that people can just chump block. Adonis Climb gets around that and can just kill people fast. The other is Steely Resolve. I love this card. It's essentially just a 2-mana enchantment. You can name either Elf or Warrior. Usually it's best to name Warrior, and it gives those creatures that you control that type Shroud. The reason you don't want to name Elf is there's a lot of elves in the deck. If you can't target them, you can't put +1 counters on it, which can kind of mess stuff up. But as I mentioned before, Ezuri is a huge target. This is just an added way to protect it. Looking at the instance, nothing too crazy, some counter spells, some removal, but my favorite card in this category is Inspiring Call. You draw a card for each creature you control with a +1 counter on it, and all of them gain indestructible. I'm a big fan of when I play Ezuri, trying to spread my +1 counters. I don't want to overextend on any one creature because it makes it too easy of a target for removal, and this rewards you for that. You can draw a bunch of cards, make all those creatures indestructible. Fortunately, a lot of the time Ezuri won't have +1 counters, but even if there's a board wipe and Ezuri dies, if you can keep the rest of your big creatures, it's not that bad. And then taking a look at the sorceries, you're going to see one in here that I'm going to get to a little bit later. But the one I do want to talk about is just a card I love, and it's River's Rebuke. And I'm actually thinking about starting to run this over Cyclonic Rift in a lot of decks, because obviously it's not better, by no means. But I just love the pettiness of it. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but it could be a little bit petty. But yeah, River's Rebuke is just one of those cards where a lot of the time I don't want to overload a Cyclonic Rift. I don't want to set everybody back. I feel bad a lot of the time because there's always a couple players kind of behind in the game who've been trying so hard to catch up. I don't want to set them back. I just want to get the one person who's either way out ahead or has been doing stuff to me specifically that I'm kind of tired of them, targeting my stuff. And the ability to just target it and then send a message, to me, River's Rebuke is one of those perfect EDH cards that I love the politics behind it, and I love the pettiness. Then looking at the lands, again, like a lot of 2-color decks, it's a pretty simple mana base. The only few that are really, really exciting, one is Alchemist Refuge. I've probably said this before, put it in every Simic deck. This card is so good. It gives you flash speed on a land, and it's just good. Yeah, you're running Simic, put this card in it. The next one I'm going to talk about is Nykthos. Again, if you're in a 1 or 2-color deck, Nykthos is such a powerful card, especially in a deck like this with so many creatures and so many permanents in general. This card can help ramp you crazy, and again, it's on a land. And the last one I'm going to talk about is kind of cool. Zoetic Cavern. I really like this card. It's a morph land. So strange. I don't know how good it actually is, but it just fit the theme of the deck, and the foil is beautiful, so that kind of helped. But yeah, it's a land that you could play as a morph. So you pay 3 mana to play it as a 2/2, and then you can flip it into a land. I do like the versatility though, because if you need that mana, you can just play it as a land. But if you have plenty of mana, maybe you just want either a blocker, maybe you want another experience counter. It's a card that, again, I love lands that just give your deck that flexibility, and this is a great job of that. All right, so now we're going to get to the best part, and in this deck, the most explosive part, and that's how we're going to win the game. And I'm going to talk about a few cards in particular that will get you there real fast. So the first way to win the game in this deck, I've brought this card up in this position quite a few times, and it is Simic Ascendancy. This is, I had already done a whole deck dedicated to this, and this deck does such a good job of trying to win. Because as I mentioned, getting 20 plus 1 counters in a single turn is not very difficult with this deck. Now, the Simic Ascendancy is going to have to survive a round at the table. That might be difficult because, you're putting those plus 1 counters on your turn, so you do have to wait that whole round. But it's really fun. It creates that kind of that chaos at the table because everybody's like, okay, that Simic Ascendancy has all the counters. The whole table kind of has to work together to try to take it out. And when the number of counter spells and morph creatures that can counter stuff in this deck, it is kind of exciting. It's like a countdown to see if that Simic Ascendancy bomb is just going to go off and end the game. So the next way to win the game is shocking. I know. The next two ways both involve Infect. So I guess I said it wasn't an Infect deck, but there's a little bit of Infect involved. And the first one is Triumph for the Hordes. I mentioned earlier you're going to have a lot of big creatures and not a lot of evasion involved in this. And Hadana's Climb was a way to give it flying. This is a way to give it trample. And, Infect too. Oh, this card is insane in this deck because it's kind of surprising how big your board states can get. And there's a lot of times where I've been installed out board states where I just have a bunch of plus 1 counters on all these creatures and all of a sudden everybody else has got creatures. If I swing away, they're just going to chump block. I'm going to get a crazy swing back because I look super threatening and I'm just not in a good spot. This ends all that. If you get a bunch of big creatures, you're at the very least taking 1 or 2 players out and probably the whole table. So another infectious way to win the game, another way that Phyrexia would just be so proud of is Blighted Agent. Blighted Agent is just one of my favorite cards. I just love it so much. The fact that they printed Infected Unblockable on the same card, not sure why they did it, but I'm thankful because it is just, it makes me so happy. And it starts, it's just a little 1/1 unblockable. In fact, what's it going to do? Well, yeah, when you start throwing those plus 1 counters on it, this is a way just out of nowhere to just take somebody out. This is scary. This is really just one of those cards that even in non-Ezuri decks, usually someone plays this, you're a little sketched out and you get scared. But with Ezuri, this is target number 1. And that's one of the reasons why when you look at the deck list, I run as many counter spells and morph counters that I do. Because of this. Because when cards like this get on the table, everyone's trying to kill it. And you just put it out, throw those plus 1 counters on, and at that point, if no one can remove it, it's just remove target player. And the last way to win the game is just, I mentioned evasion. You can give it trample, you can give it flying. Why not just make them all unblockable? And that's what Herald of Secret Streams does. This card is so ridiculous. All your creatures with plus 1 counters are unblockable. All of them. So what I'm talking about, it's a stalled board state. This is just going to end that. And the negative I had mentioned with Simic Ascendancy and even Blighted Agent is that a lot of the time, if you can't give the Blighted Agent haste or you can't flash out those counters somehow, you have to wait around at the table. That's not so what Herald of Secret Streams. What you can do with this, wait till that board state gets stalled. You have all these big plus 1 counter creatures with no evasion. People are feeling safe. They got their chump blockers. And then you play this. All of a sudden, everyone's staring at you and you have 40, 50, 60 power on board with a few creatures, and none of them are blockable. People start reevaluating life decisions at that point and realizing, this game's about to end. This is a great, fun, sneaky way just out of nowhere to get your whole board just to be able to swing and take people out. And that's going to do it for this week's deck tech. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Have you ever been on the wrong end of Ezuri? I know specifically said he's not the biggest fan of this deck. He knows exactly how scary and sometimes annoying Ezuri can be with just the endless onslaught of plus 1 counters. Also, I do need to give a quick shout out to the patrons out there. We appreciate you guys so much for supporting what it is we do. We love doing this, and nothing makes us happier than seeing people out there appreciating it. So thank you guys so much. But yes, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time.